Here's a fun fact for you, for the kids at home playing the home game. When Keith Wilson was 25, the 401k didn't even exist. And that's the truth.
That is the truth.
Welcome to the show. I told you I wasn't going back to your studio.
And you were right. We're here in Fort Mill.
I was not returning under protest until you changed the name to something more amicable, which is representative of both of our works, rather than you getting all of the glory for your show and branding.
Yeah. You beat me down. We've got it. There's no That Financial Guy Show sign back there. From now on, when you see Mr. Ruffalo and Mr. Wilson, Anthony Ruffalo, Keith Wilson, the name has changed. We've got the big news.
Nobody cares.
The plan.
It's just called The Plan.
The plan, because that's what we talk about. Financial planning.
It's about planning.
And all the components wrapped around it.
Yes.
So let's get rolling with today's episode.
All right, let's go. So what are we going to jump into today? We're going to jump into an example of how a 401k actually compounds and accumulates over a 30-year career trajectory.
And I see you got a spreadsheet, and we'll look at that in a minute. But I think this is brilliant because so many times we hear, hey, if you invest, $6,000 a year for 40 years, you'll have $1 million.
Right.
And rightfully so, people say, well, wait a minute, $1 million is a lot of money, but not 30 or 40 years from now.
Right.
And people get stuck in their own way of thinking just an X number of dollars every single year based on their income. So I think what we want to do is show you what it would look like to accumulate in your 401k the right way.
So I remember, what spurred this is kind of what Keith said. I remember when I was 22, I went to my first job, and my first boss told me, if you max out your 401k every single year, by the time you retire at like 62 years old, you'll be a millionaire. And whatever. This is 25 years ago. I couldn't. Well, it's 20 years ago. I couldn't wrap my head around that. The math of it just didn't make sense to me. I was like, how on earth, it just didn't compute. And the deferral limits back then were about $13,000 or $13,500 per year was what you could put in when I first started. So I wanted to create this example of what it really looks like. And what I say
in real life,
what it really looks like. So we're going to use a linear 7% rate of return. Now, that is unrealistic because you don't get 7%
every
straight
single year
in a row.
Yeah.
However, if you know anything about sequence of returns, or if you've studied anything about math or accumulation, is that sequence of returns only matter when you are withdrawing from your account. So it doesn't matter the sequence in which you get your returns during the accumulation phase. It only matters during the withdrawal phase, okay? So that's why I feel comfortable using a linear 7% rate of return, even though markets are going to, they're going to vary wildly and fluctuate wildly. But while you're accumulating and you're young, it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter because you got time to write it out.
And I'm going to give you I'll Tarantino it. Give you the ending. My boss was wrong. I wouldn't have been a millionaire. If I would have followed his advice, I wouldn't have been a millionaire by 62. I would have been a millionaire actually about 10 years earlier. So let's run through an example, and then here are the assumptions. Keith, what do you want to throw in?
No, I want to go to that spreadsheet.
Okay. So here are our assumptions. We're going to start you at age 25 years old, and we're going to assume that your first job, you're starting out at $60,000 a year. We're also going to assume that you're getting 4% annual merit increases or 4% annual raises. We're going to assume 7% hypothetical returns, and we're going to assume that the IRS increases 401k contribution limits by $500.
That's typically what they do anyway.
Each year. For inflation, we're going to assume you have no breaks in employment. So that's a key component, is that there are no breaks in employment, and also you never dip into your 401k and start using it for anything. So It's important. It's an important point.
It's just a plan where you stuck to it. You plowed through it. You made your contributions based on your salary or percentage thereof, and getting those 4% raises. But let's see where you're going with
We're
this.
also going to assume that your employer is matching 4% of your contribution, 100% of 4%. We're going to assume that you're getting an employer match throughout your career somewhere. And then we're also going to assume that you get promotions along the way, and we'll cover that. So the other critical assumption that we're making is that you're not starting out maxing out your 401k. You're just starting out at 10%. So on the spreadsheet, I have you deferring 10% of your base income from age 25 all the way until age 42. And then we're going to assume at 42, that's when you get a salary, and that's when you start maxing out. So, okay, Keith, first year, you start at $60,000 a year. The IRS limit is $23,500. First year, you put in 10%. You put in $6,000 of your money. You're going to get a 4% match of $2,400. You make 7% in interest. And at the end of the year, you finish with $8,988. Great. Now, we're not going to walk through this thing line item by line item.
No, let's jump to each year you're getting a 4% raise.
Right.
But then come along at age 30.
Let's say at age 30, that's when you get your first promotion.
Because that's kind of natural. Things happen. So you went from a $60,000 base salary, you get a promotion year 5. Hey, we're going to bump you up to $92,000. Now, the point is, now you're contributing 10% of $92,000.
Right. So in that year, you put in $9,200 because you're still deferring 10%. Then you're getting a 4% employer match of $36.80, and then you had hypothetical growth of your 7% of that balance is $4,800, giving you an end of year balance at the end of year 6 of $73,375. So it took you 6 years to accumulate $73,000 of deferring 10% of your income and your employer matching 4%.
And assuming you got that promotion.
Right. So now let's keep fast forwarding. Let's fast forward. Let's say you don't get another promotion until you're age 37 years old. Let's say you make another jump. So that's a big jump. So now you're 13 years into your career. Keith, what are you making?
$165,000. So right the year before that, because you had the promotion at year 5, $92,000. And each year you were getting 4% raises, things like that. At age 36, you were at $116,000. The boss says, boy, you're doing a great job. We're going to promote you to VP. And you went from 116 to 165. So now at age 37, you're making $165,000. You're contributing 10% of that, which is $16,500.
Right. And I think that's a very realistic illustration of how careers progress. That's what I've seen over the last 20-something years. It'll be several years of just little increases, maybe no increase, little increase, and then boom, there'll be a jump. Sometimes it's bigger than that. Sometimes there'll be there'll be equity compensation included in that. Sometimes there'll be cash bonuses. We're just talking about straight salary at this point. So at that point, now you're 13 years in, you're making 165, you deferred 10% of your income, which is 16.5. You got an employer match of 6,600. The beginning of the year balance was 222,000. Your hypothetical growth for that year was 7%, which is $17,000, which brings your end of year balance to $262,000. So, Paul, it took you, so you've been saving for 13 years. So for 13 years, it's been a slow grind. It took you 13 years.
Yeah, but I want to back up. I see something else that I want to cover.
Go ahead.
The magic happens at $100,000. What we didn't cover, which that occurred in this scenario, and it's hypothetical, in year 8, your ending balance on that 401k was $114,000. And in year 13, 5 years later, it's $262,000. So it more than doubled. Of course, you're making the contribution, and so far we've had 2 promotions thrown in there. But this is how that compounding really kicks in. Now, I want you to talk about that inflection point.
So what I often talk about is the magic point, the inflection point. What is the inflection point? The inflection point is the point, and this is hypothetical in nature, but to me, it makes sense. It's logical. And this is kind of why I suggest when you should get a financial advisor. When the interest, your hypothetical 7, and you could use you could be 6, it could be 8. We like to use 7 because that's around historical
Whatever your
averages.
growth, whatever your returns were.
At a hypothetical 7%, that is year 18 is when the interest that you earned on the preceding year's balance exceeds what the max the IRS allows you to put into the plan. So, to give you some numbers, you're 18 years into a 401k, you're 42 years old. The IRS maximum at this point, based on our hypothetical $500 annual increases, would be $32,000. The interest that you earned for that year on our hypothetical 7 is $34,000. So the $34,000 in interest is now having a larger impact than your own contributions. But the impact now, it's 60, you have 34 plus 32, that's 66,000 that went into the plan. Now
it's making some money.
You're really firing on all 8 cylinders.
And that ending balance is almost 528,000. So that's that beauty of the magic starting at 100,000, and then it's just compounding over there. But when you look at a real life scenario like Anthony's talking about, where you go through life, unless, I don't know, you don't want to be stuck at a job where you're only getting a 3% raise for 35 years. Hopefully you're bettering yourself and you're getting these promotions, the more salary, the 10% contribution. We're only talking about 10%.
Right. But here's what's happening from a psychological perspective, right? At 42, you're 42 years old and you're saying to yourself, Jesus, it took me from 25 to 42 to accumulate $500,000, right? So the logical math that most people go through is, well, when I'm 60, maybe I'll have $1 million.
Oh, you're gonna.
That is not how.
Let's jump.
That's not how the math works. But that's how most people think about it. And I know when I work with clients, that's what's going on in their brain. So, which is exactly why I did this spreadsheet to illustrate. And I show this when I'm working with people one-on-one. I show them to give them hope. To say, hey, listen, there's a reason you've been grinding for all this for so long. I'm telling you, just hang on there. It's on the back 9. That's when the magic starts to happen. So Keith, let's.
I want to jump to where he's got $1 million at age 48. Remember 42? That was the inflection point where his return, his interest, hypothetically,
right,
was making more than the contribution. He's still only contributing 10%, but at some point, that's going to be a max out because of his salary increasing. So at age 48, we're going to assume another promotion. And in this example, then he crosses the threshold of $1 million.
Yep. So from age 40, it took you 18 years to accumulate a little over $500,000. But then from age 42 to 48 in 5 years, you're going to double that to $1 million. That's the magic of the compounding interest on the back half. Now, fast forward. Now go from 48, where you're a little over $1 million, from 48 to age 55. At 55, now you're at $2.5 million because of the compounding interest. The compounding interest starts to it starts to almost be overwhelming, and you're like, how is this happening?
And also, the discipline that this hypothetical person had, that every year I'm dedicated. I'm going to contribute 10%. I'm not going to take out a 401k loan or anything like that. But let's skip all the way to retirement. Now he's retired at
I just put 60. You're done you're done contributing at age 60.
60.
You retire at 61, and then you're not going to touch it to age 65. So a couple of years of more growth, no more contributions between 61 and 65. Spoiler alert: what's the end of year balance after 30 years of being in the 401k?
$5.4 million.
There you have it.
So real life example of working hard, getting some promotions here and there, being dedicated. You're going to get, you should be able to get to that $1 million well before you're 65. This spreadsheet just shows the way.
Yeah. So, and in one of the things that I talk to clients about, and it's on my website, is we make the infinite finite, because you can keep going with this to infinity. And at some point, you have to say, how much is enough? When is enough enough? And that is dictated by, Keith,
the plan.
Thank you. Now, and also what the plan dictates. So we're not advocating by any means that you save 100% of all eligible dollars into a 401k. So I don't.
Yeah, this is just 401k money.
Yeah, we want to be clear that a 401k is in complement with a overall plan. And that's where planning comes in. It's about having the right dollars in 401k. It's about having the right dollars in Roth. It's about having your insurance covered, which is risk management. And it's about having after-tax dollars that are allocated for liquidity purposes throughout your working career, so you don't have to dip into 401k and retirement savings for emergency purposes. So it's all part of a balanced
plan. It's the good old three buckets. This is just one 401k. I just want to end it with some advice for young savers. So this hypothetical person started at age 25 doing 10%. We didn't talk about Roth, but he's making $60,000 in the very, very big year one. My advice or a recommendation or consideration, I should say, the younger you are, that's where you start piling money into the Roth. In this hypothetical situation, his income really jumped up there, where, hey, maybe we need to do the tax-deferred thing or a combination thereof.
Yeah. Remember, it's all about sticking to
the plan. If you like what you're seeing so far, check out this next video. Subscribe to the channel. Lord willing, we'll see you next time.